The Tower of Malevolence, also known as the Harbinger of Disaster, suddenly appeared around the world. Numerous monsters emerged from the tower, plunging humanity into a state of hopelessness as these creatures brought mankind to the brink of extinction. Just when all seemed lost, the first generation of Awakeners appeared. Known as the Founders, they managed to suppress the monsters and eventually conquer and destroy the tower. This victory marked humanity's first triumph against the invasion from another dimension. The Founders were hailed as heroes, and their legacies are commemorated at the Mausoleum of the Founders. A century later, our protagonist, Kannagi Minato, enjoys reading about their legends, which are available in the library. He reads about the great swordsman who, with a mere wooden stick from a tree branch, managed to cut down a 10,000-strong army, and the wise wizard who could chant any magic without incantation. In the current era, these tales are regarded as mere legends or fairy tales. Despite this, Kannagi dreams of marking his name in history, just like the Founders. He knows he possesses the seal of the Chosen Ones. A crest has appeared on his body. With that crest, he pledges to make his name as an Awakened, just as the Founders did. Tragically, while his classmates cheer for passing their qualification test, Kannagi remains silent, staring at his phone, which shows that he failed the hunter's qualification test. In tears, he watches everyone celebrate around him. His classmates tease him, saying they will go to the party to celebrate their admission and ask him to clean some trash. As an Awakened, he knows that writing down their name guarantees passing the test. But he has failed for 3 years in a row and is mocked as a disgrace. This was his last chance to take the test, and he now believes he can never become a hunter. He picks up the trash in the classroom, sadly reflecting that despite getting a full score on the written test and training his aura, his crest seems useless, more like a scar than a blessing. With tears in his eyes, holding a trash can, he shouts that he also wants to be like the Founders. Suddenly, a man calls his name, telling him to hurry to the school gate. Startled, he stutteringly replies that he completely forgot. Sighing, he thinks that if possible, he wants to be idolized and cheered on like the Founders. At the gate, the students are talking about the man standing before them. Izaki Kaise, an rank hunter, smiles apologetically to everyone for causing the commotion. Meanwhile, Hizaki's minions shout at him, saying he's late and making Hizaki wait, to which he stutteringly apologizes. Hizaki walks over to his minions, telling them to stop, and asks if he was right that it wasn't like he was bullying the weak. One of his minions tries to explain, but Hizaki, with a creepy smile, asks if they saw the reporters behind him. His minions quickly apologize. One of the reporters then tells Hizaki that they are looking forward to the documentary, and shows Hizaki his picture, saying they would like to use it as the cover. The reporter explains that it was taken at the moment he defeated a dragon with a single slash of his sword, and asks Hizaki what he thinks about it. Hizaki replies that it's a really good picture but a bit embarrassing. Kannagi and Hizaki enrolled in the academy together 3 years ago. Hizaki was a genius who scored at the top of the class in every subject. During their time together, Hizaki has been bullying Kannagi. Kannagi can't believe he needs to spend an entire day with Hizaki during the documentary, making him wonder why Hizaki wants him there. The reporter asks Hizaki who the person behind him is. Hizaki replies that he wants to introduce someone from the same academy generation, but then whisperingly asks one of his minions what his name is again. The minion replies, Kannagi Minato, which Hizaki then tells the reporter. Hizaki adds that although Kanaga's grades aren't great, he always asks Hizaki for favors, leaving him with almost no time for his training. He also claims that he gives Kannagi advice and guidance, leaving Kannagi stunned and confused. Kannagi is even more surprised when Hizaki tells the reporters that Kannagi sometimes asks for financial support. Kannagi knows this is bullshit because, while Hizaki always took his money, Kannagi never asked for anything from him. He had never experienced such a pathetic year in his life before. The reporter, amazed by Hizaki's story, tells Hizaki that he is the embodiment of perfection. Hizaki then grabs Kannagi, shouting to the reporters to look forward to it because he will be an Awakened who will write history. The reporter then shouts to Kannagi, saying he must be happy to receive Hizaki's kindness and asks if he has any words for his benefactor. Kannagi is about to respond that there is no way he would do it, but Hizaki whispers to him that he failed the test and is completely worthless, so they should settle this peacefully. Hizaki squeezes Kanaga's shoulder tightly, making him remember the bullying. Smiling in fear, Kannagi tells the reporter that he is completely grateful for everything Hizaki has done for him and that there are no words to describe his gratitude. After that, Hizaki walks forward, leaving Kannagi behind, and tells the reporter that since they don't have much time, they should move on to the next topic. Hizaki points to his trophies, leaving Kannagi shaking in fear. Kannagi hears someone behind him questioning if they really need his name in the article, but one of the reporters responds that they don't because no one would be interested anyway. Kannagi realizes that even if someone is evil, as long as they have the power to become a hunter, everyone would be on their side and their name would be remembered. He tries to stop the tears in his eyes while stutteringly saying his name. Suddenly, someone shouts his name, shocking him. He sees Hizaki and his minions walking closer, with Hizaki telling him to come to the mausoleum of the founders after school. Kannagi asks why and wonders what is happening and what will happen after, but Hizaki just smiles and asks if he wants to take a re-examination, confusing Kannagi even more. Hizaki tells him that he will talk to the association. When Kannagi asks why Hizaki is doing this, Hizaki responds that it's a way to increase his popularity, and the last scene of the documentary is set at the mausoleum, so they need to film there and discuss it afterwards. Hizaki then warns him that he must come. Kannagi wonders if this is real but thinks that even though he hates the idea of being used by Hizaki to increase his popularity, it's another chance for him regardless of the situation. He smiles, swearing that this time, he will pass for sure. Later, in the Mausoleum of the Founders, the reporter captures footage of Hizaki, saying, "At the Mausoleum of the Founders, a single top-class hunter pledges to protect humanity's future, and this moment is truly picture perfect." After that, the reporters tell Hizaki they managed to take a good picture and thank him for his time during his busy day. Hizaki replies that he looks forward to the article. Once the reporters leave, Hizaki moves further into the mausoleum. When he arrives where his minions are waiting, he asks if they have found the entry point. His minions excitedly reply that they have and point to a secret pathway, asking if it is the one they were looking for. Suddenly, someone asks from behind what they are doing. Hizaki nonchalantly asks if he hasn't figured it out yet, and tells him it's a treasure hunt. Kannagi angrily shouts at Hizaki, calling him a grave bandit and asking if he even understands who is resting in that place. Hizaki responds that of course he knows, but then he kicks one of the founders' statues and asks if he's right that it's only the rotten bodies of the past. He explains that they couldn't let the chance slip away to become millionaires and dismisses the importance of the founders' remains, saying they are just dead bodies and don't matter. Kannagi acknowledges that the founders were amazing, which is why he wants to be like them, an awakened whose name is marked in history. Enraged, Kannagi rushes to attack Hizaki, calling him a bastard. However, Hizaki sidesteps swiftly and punches him hard in the stomach, making him cough up blood. He collapses to the ground, clutching his stomach in pain, while Hizaki berates him for daring to attack. Hizaki continues to assault him, making him think he might die. But then one of Hizaki's minions calls out, saying they've found something and shows a lot of valuable items, which shocks him. Hizaki grabs a circular crystal and excitedly asks if the aura is emitting from the item itself. Hizaki shouts that it's wonderful and that with it, he could live without needing to work for the rest of his life. Kannagi tries to stop them, shouting not to touch it, but his voice fails to come out. Hizaki then grabs him by the shirt and says he'll explain it as simply as possible so a failure like him can understand. Hizaki reveals that he had been looking for a weakling like him all along, having tricked him with the promise of a re-examination. He knew about Kannagi visiting the library all the time and found it amusing. Finally, Hizaki declares he has found a useful pawn. Hizaki then drags him outside, smilingly shouting that he dreamed of becoming a hunter, so he finally decided to steal the treasures of the mausoleum and go missing, which is a tragic story. Kannagi stutteringly tells Hizaki to stop the bullshit, but Hizaki continues, saying it will be tomorrow's top news. Hizaki then lifts him over a cliff, telling him that after robbing the mausoleum of the founders and escaping from the police, the culprit will be a third-year hunter from the training academy. Hizaki then lets go of him and mockingly asks for his name again. Kannagi looks at Hizaki in anger and fear, but Hizaki tells him that knowing his name doesn't matter now and says goodbye. Kannagi falls into the river, wondering if this is how he will die after all the training and tests. He thinks everything was meaningless because he is fading away without being remembered by anyone. Suddenly, lights appear around him and many figures surround him. He hears them saying that he will be their vessel and grant their wish. The figures introduce themselves as the heroic spirits sealed in that place, the very souls of the founders. Shocked, he wonders what this means, hearing voices and seeing lights from the founders. One of the founders tells him that the crest on his hand is the crest of nothingness. It doesn't possess any power by itself, but it can manifest any power he could have never imagined. The voice tells him to choose one of them and form a contract because they are the pinnacle of every art: magic, endurance, swordsmanship, spearmanship, summoning magic, alchemy, and more. Whoever he chooses, he will gain power from that benefactor. The voice asks him whose power he seeks. He initially thinks of wanting power like Hizaki's but changes his mind. He responds that he wants a power incomparable in the world, a power to overwhelm everything and wipe away all the humiliations he endured. Another voice then tells him to decide whom he chooses. Kannagi replies that he wants everything and all of their powers, they should give him everything. The founders consider him greedy, thinking it's impossible, as no matter how strong the vessel is, taking everything would be a mess. But Kannagi absorbs them all, shouting at them to shut up and, instead of yapping their mouths, to enter him. Kannagi pushes himself to absorb all the heroic spirits, causing mixed reactions among the founders. Some panic, some are amazed, others don't care, and some wonder who he is. Eventually, he absorbs all of them. From atop the hill, Hisaki looks back when he sees a light emerging from the river. Suddenly, the river rises as if something exploded beneath it, making everyone turn and wonder what is happening. Kannagi then flies out of the river, landing on the hill in front of Hisaki and his minions with different hair and eye colors. One of Hisaki's minions sneers, saying Kannagi crawled back like a tenacious roach. Kannagi breaks a small branch off a long branch and swings it at Hisaki's minions, who are shocked and ask what the hell he is doing. Hisaki's minions then teasingly laugh at him, asking if he really intends to fight them with a stick. Kannagi continues to swing his stick, prompting Hisaki to sigh and tell his minions to end it, ensuring Kannagi doesn't crawl back again. Hisaki orders his minions to cut Kannagi's head off. One of the minions grabs his sword and arrogantly replies to Hisaki that he understands. He taunts Kannagi, saying that based on the recent exam, his sword aura is a rank and he has mastered the way of the swordsman. He tells Kannagi to be grateful to be cut down by him. Kannagi simply responds, mastering the way of the swordsman. The man then jumps towards Kannagi, slashing at him with his sword. Smiling, the man stops behind him, but then blood begins to pour from all over his body and head as if he had been slashed. The man screams in pain, while Hisaki and the other minion look on in shock, unable to believe what they are seeing. Kannagi then tells the man that he has mastered the way of the swordsman and asks him what kind of swordsmanship he uses. The other minion casts a spell, calling upon the green cradle and the gaze of destruction. Kannagi points his finger at the minion and tells him that he is slow. He then attacks the minion with a spell, Thunderbolt Haddad, without any incantation. The minion cannot believe it, and a powerful thunderbolt strikes him, electrocuting him to death. Hisaki cannot believe that Kannagi cut down his minion with nothing but a mere branch and cast magic without any incantation. Hisaki recalls the legend of a great swordsman who, long ago, cut down a 10,000-strong army with only a single wooden stick, and a wizard who could chant any magic without incantation. In the current era, these stories are considered mere legends or fairy tales. Now, the souls of the Awakeners that slumbered in the mausoleum of the founders dwell within Kannagi Minato. There are 106 souls inside his body. Kannagi remembers Hisaki telling everyone that he would mark his name in history as an awakened. He walks closer to Hisaki, declaring that his name shall not be forgotten and that he shall be remembered eternally, including the new myth about him. Kannagi stops approaching Hisaki, unable to believe that he managed to absorb the souls of the founders with his crest of nothingness. He hears the founders inside him, content and excited, marveling at the spaciousness of their new home. They ask how many centuries it has been since they were freed from boredom. Kannagi smiles, feeling the founders' happiness. He had memorized their legends for a long time, and now their souls are inside him. However, the founders decide it will be a race to see who gets to control his body. The great swordsman, Hinoki Ryukairu, calls to Kannagi, surprising him. Hinoki remarks that it is expected to be remembered after such a long time. He asks Kannagi what he plans to do. Kannagi asks if he means dealing with Hisaki, but Hinoki dismisses Hisaki as trash and points behind him, asking what Kannagi will do about that. Shocked, Kannagi walks closer to Hisaki, who stutteringly tells him to stay away, and not to look down on a rank hunter like him. Kannagi punches Hisaki in the face, sending him spinning in midair from the force. Kannagi then faces the bag that is releasing a dark aura and tells Hisaki to get out of the way. He focuses on the bag, and suddenly, a strong power emanates from it, surprising him. Hinoki, however, smiles calmly. Meanwhile, in the city, a Cerberus is attacking everything in its path. A man shouts to Kisaragi to handle it. Kisaragi faces the beast, and when it lunges at him, he jumps above it and attacks with a waterfall impact from above. The people cheer in amazement, shouting that Kisaragi instantly killed an A-rank monster. The S-rank hunter, Kisaragi, thanks them for their compliments and asks where Hisaki is. The man tells Kisaragi that because of an interview, it must be nice to be called a young hope. But Kisaragi tells the man not to say it like that. If Hisaki becomes more popular, their guild's reputation will also rise. They decide to get a drink after filing a report when they hear a strong growl and feel intense pressure. Everyone panics, wondering if it is a demon. Kisaragi looked back when he heard his team in pain and saw normal people collapsing and hunters struggling because of the pressure. He noticed that A-rank and B-rank hunters couldn't stand against it, indicating it was an S-rank monster, so Kisaragi immediately made a call. Meanwhile, on the street, people passed out due to the pressure, which was coming from the mausoleum of the founders. Hisaki, shakingly sitting up, was surprised to see a huge monster emerging from the bag in front of them. He asked if it was a demon and what the hell it was. Kannagi replied that it was because Hisaki had opened the mausoleum, releasing one of the boss monsters from the tower that was sealed there. The seal was undone when Hisaki took the items away. Inoki confirmed this, explaining that some demons from the tower survived by hiding and becoming dormant. He identified the demon as the embodiment of emptiness, a stacked-eyed tiger estimated to be above S rank in danger level. Hizaki tried to stand up, shaking, while Hinoki explained that the stacked-eyed tiger is a living disaster that kills numerous humans within a few kilometers with its poisonous aura. This demon was quite common during their era, but now it was overwhelmingly powerful for the youngsters of this era. Panicking, Hizaki ran away, shouting that he needed to escape or else he would be killed. Kannagi warned Hizaki that it was better not to move, as the tiger targets moving objects. The stacked-eyed tiger saw Hizaki running and immediately lashed out with one of its tentacles. Hizaki, covering himself with his sword and shouting at the demon to stay away, was helpless as the tentacle pierced his chest. Despite having slain a dragon with his sword before, Hizaki couldn't stop the demon from spreading its tentacles inside his body. The stacked-eyed tiger began to absorb Hizaki, making him scream in pain. Kannagi simply told him that he had warned him. Hinoki then wrapped his hand around Kannagi and asked if he would give his body to him completely. Hinoki then asked if Kannagi wanted to see the founder Hinoki's one-handed sword style, thinking he would take the vessel while the others were distracted. Kannagi responded that he didn't mind lending his body, to which Hinoki excitedly agreed. However, another founder grabbed Hinoki and accused him of trying to run away with such a strong vessel, claiming it for themselves. Realizing he had been noticed, Hinoki tried to calm everyone down. They all stopped when Kannagi told them he had one condition: he would only lend his body to everyone. This confused them. Kannagi tells the founders that he will definitely surpass all of them and, in time, reach the same heights they did. He also wants to see how strong he will become. He then challenges them to show him what they've got. Hinoki wonders what Kannagi's deal is, thinking he's insane while drawing his sword. Hinoki then takes control of Kannagi's body and shouts to the other founders that they should join in. He slashes the demon with the stick, aided by Hinoki, severing one of the demon's arms. The demon launches its other arm to attack, but Kannagi, while looking at the chopped stick in his hand, manages to dodge as another founder possesses his body. He then uses his hand to cut the demon's arm, shocking the demon. Kannagi grabs a huge stick from the ground, and the spearman founder possesses his body, using the stick as a spear to attack the demon. Another founder then possesses him, allowing him to easily dodge the demon's attacks. The old founder takes over, enabling Kannagi to grab the demon's tentacle and slam it into the ground with immense force. The demon is flung into the air, and Kannagi grabs the bag. The archer founder possesses him, and he aims and successfully hits the demon in the head. It screams in pain as its blood spreads around. Kannagi wipes his face and continuously attacks the demon in different ways as the founders possess his body one by one. Hinoki then takes control again and grabs Hizaki's broken sword from the ground. The demon attempts a surprise underground attack, but Kannagi's eyes turn yellow as the great wizard possesses him and electrocutes the demon. He then jumps, and when he is above it, Hinoki uses his one-handed sword style, Gekurautachi wave cutting blade, to slash the demon in half, killing it. Kannagi smiles victoriously. Meanwhile, a raven perched on a tree watches everything that just happened. In the city, a man floating in midair answers his phone, incredulous that the demon was already defeated when he was just about to head over there. He asks if there are any strong hunters nearby. The person on the other line responds that, based on footage from the raven, it was a student of the academy. The man, surprised, acknowledges this. The world's strongest awakened, Ikehara Midori, then tells the person on the other line that he wants to meet that student. The next morning, Ikehara is sitting on a pile of dead monsters, calling the director and informing him about the S-rank demon. The director asks if Ikehara defeated it, but he replies that it was not him. Based on footage from his raven, it was Kannagi Minato who defeated it. Ikehara mentions that Kannagi failed the hunter's examination 3 years in a row, which makes it hard for him to believe. He then asks the director if he could do him a favor. Meanwhile, at the academy, students are asking each other if they were okay yesterday because the aura was so awful that they couldn't move. One student jokes with his friend, asking what he would do if he told him that it was actually him who killed the monster. The friend dismisses it as impossible, noting that it has been 10 years since the last emergence of an S-rank hunter. However, the friend reminds him of a rumor that the one who defeated the monster was actually a student from the academy. Kannagi walking with a stick to support his shaking, while the other student dismisses the idea, thinking no hunter could defeat that demon, and if there were such a person, he wouldn't be in their academy. Kannagi is amazed that the only topic of conversation today is yesterday's incident. Suddenly, a man bumps him aside, telling him he's in the way. Kannagi falls to the floor, and the man thinks there is no way such a loser could be the S-rank slayer while looking at him. Kannagi knows he defeated the demon yesterday, but it was because he lent his body to the founders. Now, his body is painfully torn apart as the recoil. Someone then laughingly asks him if he is completely okay with it, and when he looks up, he sees it as Hinoki. Inoki tells him to get a grip and asks if he wanted to surpass them. Kannagi remembers saying it last night and confidently responds that he did. He pushes himself to stand up while Hinoki laughingly tells him to show his guts. Hinoki looks at the students and notices that the level of the Awakeners in this era is too low, more or less the same as normal humans, which he considers trash. Hinoki also thinks that if the tower were to emerge right at that moment, the world would surely end. But then Hinoki is surprised to sense someone with a strong aura. Kannagi asks Hinoki what is wrong, but Hinoki replies it's nothing, though he thinks that just now he felt a tremendous aura. Suddenly, a professor shouted for Kannagi to hurry up and come over. Apologizing, Kannagi asked if it was his letter of resignation, knowing that he had only 3 chances to take the test and that the hunter's qualification test can only be taken from the training academy, meaning he would need to start over from the general admission slot. However, the professor told him to go to the field immediately because it was his re-examination, which surprised him. A moment later, the students watched from the window, wondering if there had ever been a hunter re-examination test before, but no one knew. Meanwhile, in the field, Kannagi's mission was a 100-meter sprint, with an average time of 3.6 seconds and a best record of 2.7 seconds. He knew he was not in perfect condition but needed to give his best. The man who had pushed him earlier told the students that Kannagi was famous for being a failure even in the teacher's office, and that giving him a chance after 3 years of failure was just sympathy. However, when Kannagi began to run, everyone was shocked when he completed it in 1.2 seconds. In the next test, his mission was to complete a 3,000-meter sprint with an average time of 4 minutes and 20 seconds and a best record of 3 minutes and 17 seconds. To everyone's astonishment, he finished it in 1 minute and 17 seconds. The next test was push-ups in 2 minutes, with an average of 215 push-ups and a best record of 418 push-ups, but he managed 840 push-ups. The next test was the bench press, with an average weight of 4,000 kilograms and a best record of 620 kilograms, yet he lifted 1,280 kilograms. The students were shocked and asked what he was because he beat all the best records by more than double, and the ladies thought he was cool. Kannagi wondered if the founders were still lending him with their powers, but Hinoki knew they wouldn't help with something like this and that they hadn't done anything. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, the headmaster gave Ikehara all the current records of Kannagi Minato. Ikehara thanked the headmaster and was amazed at Kannagi's records. The headmaster told Ikehara that when he heard about the request for re-examination, he thought something was wrong. Even though Kannagi's physical abilities are amazing, the real issue is his magic capacity because, in all the tests over the past 3 years, Kannagi's capacity was immeasurable, and he essentially had no mana, so the headmaster thought it would be a waste of their attention. Ikehara's secretary commented that this was what they expected of Kannagi, but Ikehara just laughed and said they would see about it. Meanwhile, in the field, he was taking the magic measurement test. The professor asked if he understood how the measurement worked and explained that he had to use his magic to spin the giant fans within 30 seconds. The number of rotations would determine his score. He replied that he did. The average score for the test was 1,513 spins, and the best record was 4,022 spins. He stretched out his hand, remembering that in the past 3 years, he couldn't even move the fans, no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't control mana because he couldn't feel it at all, but now he could feel it circulating around him. From his right foot, it flowed upward into his body, circling inside him and returning to his right foot. He also knew that he could accelerate the cycle with his breathing and release it through the palm of his right hand. The professor then shouted for him to start. He released his mana into the fan, and the count machine began to register the spins. Suddenly, the fan spun rapidly, speeding up the count and shocking the professors. The fan turned so fast that the counting machine couldn't keep up, and the air from the fan made it difficult for the professors to see the score. Then, the machine holding the fan exploded, and the fan flew away. It soared towards a building, causing the students to panic, and crashed directly into the headmaster's office, causing a loud explosion. The headmaster narrowly avoided being hit and collapsed from the shock. Ikehara's secretary was in disbelief, but Ikehara laughed, saying it seemed Kannagi and he were alike. Ikehara then looked at him, declaring that Kannagi was the second person in history after him to achieve an immeasurable score. The professor, who had witnessed everything, shouted that he had passed the hunter examination. The students cheered for him, exclaiming that he had achieved the best record in every test. He looked at his hand in disbelief, tears streaming down his face, and thanked them profusely, amazed that the power had been inside him all this time. Hinoki smiled, expecting this outcome, and Kannagi knew that by lending his body to the founders, the potential within him had been awakened. Laughingly, Hinoki told him that he was not an ordinary person with the crest of nothingness and that he had been waiting for him for more than a century. Hinoki then asked if they would agree and Kannagi might fulfill their wish, believing that he might be the one they had been waiting for. Just then, a strong aura landed in front of him, shocking him. He stutteringly asked what it was and if it was an explosion, but Hinoki recognized it as the tremendous aura he had felt that morning. Ikehara greeted him, and he was stunned to see the legendary figure standing before him. Ikehara congratulated him on his hunter examination results. He stutteringly thanked Ikehara, unable to believe that the legend knew his name and wondering what was happening. Ikehara then said they should start an additional test for him, suggesting they call it try to hit the strongest hunter at least once, which shocked him to his core. Ikehara Midori, a 23-year-old man, became a full-fledged hunter at the age of 9. No one could deny that he was the world's strongest hunter. Ikehara turned thousands of demons into ashes in an instant, and weak demons and even hunters could be easily killed with a mere fraction of his power. He single-handedly conquered the Pandemonium outbreak 10 years ago and the Kyushu outbreak 5 years ago, earning him the title of a living singularity. This is why it was such a shock when Ikehara told him to try to hit him at least once. Hinoki called out excitedly, urging him to lend his body to him immediately. Ikehara then explained the simple rule: if he could land a hit within the next minute, he would win. Even if he lost, there would be no punishment. Additionally, Ikehara would only attack once every 10 seconds. Ikehara assured him there was no need to worry, as he would go easy on him and he could use any skill he wanted, while Ikehara wouldn't use any skills at all. Ikehara then summoned a swarm of different weapons, telling him he could choose any weapon he liked. This surprised him, and he wondered what was happening. He was confused about the additional test and whether he could really fight the famous Ikehara Midori head-on in that 1-minute time frame. He asked Ikehara if he could really use any weapon, and Ikehara grabbed a katana, replying that he could use them absolutely because his body was harder than a katana. Ikehara then easily cut the katana in half, stating that his body was sharper than any sword. He snapped out of his thoughts when Hinoki shouted at him to hurry up and switch with him. Hinoki then angrily asked how dare Ikehara say such words, shouting that he couldn't forgive Ikehara now. This made him realize that Hinoki was getting excited and that Ikehara's power was at the same level as the founders, meaning he didn't stand a chance. Behind him, Hinoki was fuming with anger, staring at Ikehara. He sighed and faced Ikehara with a brave face. The students watched excitedly, shouting that something interesting was starting, a real battle with Ikehara. Hinoki asked what he was doing and was about to tell him to lend him his body quickly. But then Ikehara started the timer, smiling as he told him they should begin. He grabbed a sword and rushed at Ikehara to attack. Hinoki asked if he was planning on fighting alone, insisting it wasn't fair, but he continued to attack anyway, knowing it was meaningless. He knew for sure that to become a legend, he couldn't just borrow the power of the founders, he had to do it with his own power. He then tried to slash Ikehara, but Ikehara easily dodged without moving much. Kannagi continuously attacked Ikehara while Ikehara was on the phone, asking him which social media he was using and telling him that he was sure the incident would be recorded and go viral. The students couldn't believe that Ikehara was on his phone while effortlessly dodging all of Kannagi's attacks, shouting that Ikehara was incredibly strong. Despite his efforts, Kannagi couldn't land a single hit on Ikehara, who wasn't even taking the fight seriously. The students were amazed by Kannagi's relentless attacks, yet one of them thought something was off about his movements. They wondered how long the fight would continue while watching intently. Kannagi lifted his sword, feinting a vertical slash before switching to a horizontal one aimed at Ikehara's feet and throat, successfully executing the move. Kannagi was amazed at how his body could move exactly as he wanted, realizing he didn't tire from the movements. He wondered if it was the effect of lending his body to the founders, knowing his body was changing. His thoughts were interrupted when Ikehara placed a finger on Kannagi's head, preparing to flick him, and mentioned that 10 seconds had already passed. Fortunately, Kannagi dodged in time, but Ikehara's released power destroyed the field, making Kannagi realize that his head would have been gone if the attack had hit. Ikehara looked at his hand in confusion, thinking it was strange since he didn't sense any evil from Kannagi and couldn't believe he had mistakenly adjusted his output. Meanwhile, Kannagi panicked, knowing he would be killed at this rate, and tried to recall the feeling of his stronger self. He then released a strong aura, surprising Ikehara. Kannagi attacked Ikehara again, and the students were amazed by his increasing speed, though he still couldn't land a hit. The students shouted that the camera couldn't keep up with their movements. Ikehara noticed Kannagi's increased speed and sensed a different atmosphere, wondering if there was a condition to activate this power or if Kannagi wanted to keep it a secret. Realizing another 10 seconds had passed, Ikehara decided to attack Kannagi lightly this time. He bent down and positioned his finger to flick again, but this time he hit Kannagi in the chest, sending him slamming into the wall hard. Kannagi coughed up blood but thought it was awesome and marvelous to be fighting against the world's strongest awakened. He knew that if his body were the same as yesterday's and had taken that hit, he would already be dead. This realization made him smile because he knew it meant he was getting stronger. However, he also knew that with his current skill, he wouldn't be able to pass Ikahara's test. He decided to brute force his way through the remaining time he had and ran towards Ikahara again. Suddenly, Ikahara appeared next to him with incredible speed, making Kannagi stop and look to his side. Ikahara apologized and told him he had seen enough. He added that the 30 seconds were up, then hit Kannagi on the nape, causing him to slowly fall asleep. As Kannagi fell to the ground, Ikahara thought he could see that Kannagi was a genius, but not on the same level as his comrades. In the end, Kannagi couldn't fully demonstrate the power Ikahara had glimpsed. Ikahara called his secretary, telling her they should head back and expressing his disappointment with the result. Suddenly, Kannagi grabbed his sword, and Ikahara felt a strong aura behind him. Kannagi, now under Hinoki's control, asked Ikahara what he had said. Ikahara looked back and saw Kannagi releasing a powerful aura. Hinoki, controlling Kannagi's body, told Ikahara that the stubborn brat was already in bed, so he could finally use the body. Hinoki then walked closer to Ikahara and suggested they should play a little bit longer. Kannagi's spirit, out of his own body, panicked when he saw that Hinoki was now controlling it. However, Ikahara smiled, recognizing the presence he had felt earlier. This made him question if it was a different person or just a skill, but regardless, he knew that Kannagi was now a monster. Kannagi then attacked and shouted at him not to space out. He noticed that Kannagi's movements had changed, his speed and power were on a different level. Suddenly, Ikahara felt a sword near his face and ducked just in time to dodge it. Kannagi swung his sword again, and Ikahara leaped away to create distance. Still in shock, Kannagi positioned his sword and swung it once more, but Ikahara bent down in time, causing Kannagi to slash the building behind him instead. The students inside the building rushed away in panic, realizing the danger. Ikahara noticed that Kannagi's slashes were becoming unpredictable, yet he could anticipate his opponent's movements. It felt like ancient swordsmanship to him, like a torrent of water. Ikahara stretched out his palm, laughingly telling Kannagi that such skill was needed to defeat an S rank like him. He then raised his palm to make Kannagi sleep again, noting that only 40 seconds had passed. But Kannagi moved closer with incredible speed and swung his sword, shouting that there was no way Ikahara could hit him. Ikahara jumped away to dodge the attack and laughingly told Kannagi that his skills were amazing. The students couldn't believe what they were witnessing, or that Ikahara Midori was on the defensive. Kannagi shouted that Ikahara was boring and that there was no need to hold back against him. He also warned Ikahara that he would beat him up if he looked down on him. Kannagi then leaped to attack, but Ikahara laughed and replied, "Fine." He kicked a stone and it headed into the weapons behind him. All the weapons float in the air. Ikahara jumped, surprising Kannagi, and grabbed one of the weapons floating above them. He excitedly tells Ikahara that he's finally going all out. They then engage in an intense mid-air battle, foot on foot, stunning the students who watch in amazement. They grab every weapon in sight and shatter them into pieces with their sheer strength. Meanwhile, inside Kannagi's body, the founders observe Hinoki going full throttle. They are impressed that Ikahara manages to hold his own against Hinoki. One founder, feeling envious, remarks on the fun and pitiful nature of not being the one to fight while he watches in silence. One of the founders asks if this means Kannagi's body isn't yet a perfect vessel. An old man suggests joining the fray, but another founder tells him to stop, calling him tactless. The great wizard silently stares, surprised to realize that he is studying Hinoki's movements, trying to learn from them. He notices Hinoki pouncing from below, shifting his center of gravity, but the sword Hinoki wields shatters into pieces once again. Hinoki, frustrated by the low-quality sword, feels a surge of anger. Ikahara, on the other hand, finds the battle exhilarating, his heart racing with excitement. However, Ikahara notices that there are no swords left and wonders if Kannagi will resort to using firearms. Ikahara then taunts Hinoki, shouting that there are only 10 seconds left and teasingly asks what he'll do now. Hinoki glances back at the building behind him and leaps toward it. He heads for the man who had pushed Kannagi earlier and snatches the man's sword. Just then, Ikahara jumps closer, launching his fist at Hinoki, causing a loud explosion upon impact with the building. Fortunately, Hinoki dodges the attack and reappears in front of Ikahara. They resume their mid-air battle, foot on foot, enjoying the fight as if it were a game. Ikahara shouts that it's fun and suggests they continue a bit longer, while the students notice their building is on the verge of collapsing. The combatants reach the top of the building where Ikahara's secretary watches intently. Ikahara then places his hand on a huge fan and grabs it, causing it to crack. He sees Ikahara take out the fan from the headmaster's room and aims it at him. Ikahara then threw the fan at him, but he was surprised when Hinoki used his one-handed sword style to slash the fan before it hit him. The fan shattered into tiny pieces, and Ikahara shouted excitedly, telling him he was truly amazing. However, Hinoki simply launched his sword, telling Ikehara to eat it. Yet, to his shock, the sword shattered into pieces. Ikehara raised his hand, aiming at him. Ikehara then told him that 60 seconds had passed and launched his palm at Hinoki, causing him to fall. Hinoki cursed, but then Kannagi jumped onto Hinoki's back, shouting "not yet," and pushed Hinoki back towards the other founders. He then gently tapped Ikehara's palm aside, dodging Ikehara's attack, which shocked both Hinoki and Ikehara. However, one of his hands was dislocated from the impact. Still, he told Ikehara that he only needed a single hit and punched Ikehara in the face with his other hand. The battle between the singularities felt like it lasted an eternity from the inside, a fierce struggle for a seemingly small answer, akin to a chess game where both players are equally skilled. Hinoki knew that despite the intensity, it had only lasted a brief moment. He smiled proudly, realizing that Kannagi had opened a new path to victory. However, Kannagi was in shock when he saw that Ikehara had stopped his fist in time. He cursed, knowing he hadn't hit him, but then Ikehara smiled and pulled his fist to his face, surprising him. Ikehara then happily told him that he had passed before they both slammed into the ground. A moment later, the students watching were confused, asking what had happened. Ikehara, holding Kannagi, collapsed and called his secretary, Rin, telling her they should go back. Rin appeared next to Ikehara, asking how it went. Ikehara replied that Kannagi had passed and that he was interesting. But since he had accidentally broken Kannagi's arm, she should help fix it. She replied that she understood. The students, hearing Ikehara, couldn't believe that Kannagi had passed. Suddenly, they cheered for him, realizing that passing meant he had landed a hit on Ikehara, which woke Kannagi up. Rin, who was healing him, told him to let her heal his arm and not to move, which he agreed to, thanking her. Rin then congratulated him on passing the test. Kannagi thanked her for the compliment, but then sat up in shock, asking if he had really passed and if he had truly landed a hit on Ikehara. Suddenly, Ikehara appeared next to him, saying it was cruel for him to forget so soon, shocking Kannagi. Ikehara then told him that they were even now and a pass is a pass. He mentioned that he went serious midway through his consecutive attacks, but Hinoki didn't respond, knowing it was true. Ikehara also praised him, saying he dodged his strongest attack and his movements were amazing, urging him to be proud. Kannagi excitedly replied, yes. Kannagi then called out to Ikehara, asking what comes next after passing, making Rin look at Ikehara in confusion. Ikehara, also unsure, stared back at Kannagi, searching for an answer as the students watched intently. Later that night, at his house, his mother was frying food when she asked him how many guests were coming. While cleaning the house, he replied that he didn't know, probably only one person. His mother remarked that today was a good day, on top of passing the hunter's examination. He was being scouted by Ikehara Midori. She then told him that she always believed he was a kid who could achieve anything with effort. He warmly replied, yes. However, his mother worriedly commented that for such a celebrity to visit their house, it might be mistaken for a dog house. He shouted back that Ikehara was not that kind of person. After cleaning and helping his mother, he lay on his bed to rest and stared at Ikehara's card, wondering why Ikehara hadn't given it any thought. His mind wandered back to the field, recalling Rin taking Ikehara down and Ikehara screaming in pain. Ikehara had asked him if he didn't say he would become one of his comrades if he won. He replied, thinking he hadn't heard such words, making Rin more furious as she tightly grabbed Ikehara's feet, causing him to scream in pain. Ikehara then told him that there were too many eyes around and asked if he could visit his home tonight to discuss things in detail. He promised to explain the choices available and reveal who their real enemies were. He pondered who their real enemies could be, knowing that the tower was already destroyed by the founders and that the current hunter's task was to hunt the monsters that had escaped from the dimensional crack. He wondered if there was any other reason, but then he fell asleep. Suddenly, Hinoki shoutingly woke him up, startling him. He saw that Hinoki and the founders were there. He asked why everyone was there and what was wrong, but Hinoki simply replied that they had been discussing something and had just finished. Confused, he covered his body and asked Hinoki if they had decided who would get his body. Before Hinoki could reply, the doorbell rang. Apologizing to Hinoki, he explained that he thought Ikehara had arrived and suggested they talk about it later. He then walked to the kitchen near the door, noticing it was dark and wondering what was happening. To his shock, he saw his mother lying on the floor, collapsed. Panicking, he called out to her in worry. He rushed to his mother but stopped when he saw someone sitting in the kitchen. He saw the person grab the food his mother had made and eat it happily. Watching the man eat and compliment the food, he noticed the kitchen was a mess. The man teased him, saying he had to discipline his old lady and, if he wanted to impress customers, they should at least use expensive meat. He asked the man who he was and what he had done to his mother, but the man shouted at him to watch his mouth and introduced himself as Heitani Goru, the S-rank hunter who had come to pick him up and was one of Ikehara Midori's comrades. Heitani then told him to hurry up and take his luggage because they were moving to their base. face. Enraged, he launched his fist at Heitani, who dodged it and laughingly appeared behind him, asking if he was challenging him. He remained silent, remembering his mother telling him that even though his father had passed away, she would raise him alone to be a proud person. He recalled his mother's shoes being a mess, but she had told him it was fine and she could still wear them. She reminded him not to forget to buy himself new sneakers and congratulated him for doing a great job, promising to make his favorite tonkatsu for dinner. He then looked seriously at Heitani and demanded to know what he had done to his mother. Hinoki noticed that Kannagi's opponent was an S-rank hunter from that era and told everyone it was about time to act. Although he was annoyed just by looking at Ikehara's rip-off, they all knew from that fight how the founders should treat Kannagi from now on. Heitani teasingly tells him that his angry face is pretty cute. He then lifts his hand to slap him, but he just calmly waits, grabbing Heitani's hand before it hits him. He easily drags Heitani around, surprising the old founder, who remembers this move from their fights against monsters. In just minutes, the peaceful Kannagi house is destroyed as Heitani is thrown out the window, smashing through the backyard wall. Yet, Heitani manages to land on his feet before hitting the ground as he walks closer. Heitani wonders if what he just witnessed was Aikido. He recalls watching his fight with Ikehara that afternoon on video, and not only noticing his tremendous aura and swordsmanship but also that power. He then tells Heitani that he expected such resilience from an A-rank hunter, remarking that he is sturdier than Hizaki. Glaring, he orders Heitani to hurry up and answer his question already. He demands to know what Heitani did to his mother, who is inside struggling in pain as poison spreads through her body. Heitani laughs and teasingly tells him that based on his words, it seems he doesn't know. Heitani then shouts that it was poison and that his mother was getting in his way, so he put her to sleep. He adds that if she's lucky, she might only suffer minor side effects. Calmly, he tells Heitani that he doesn't understand, making Heitani look at him confused. He then asks why they would hurt the family of someone who might become their comrade. But Heitani just laughs and asks if he said comrade. Heitani suddenly appears behind him, ready to attack. He avoids Heitani's slash just in time, but Heitani continuously attacks, declaring that he won't become their comrade but only a doll that obeys their orders. Heitani taunts him, saying that once they hold his precious ones hostage, he will obey because he is naive. He is then surprised when Heitani steps on his foot and slash him, mockingly asking if he was right. Creating distance away from Heitani, he feels his cheek burning and wonders what it is, noticing the poison spreading on his face. Heitani then shows his fingers, which are coated with sharp things and poison, and teasingly tells him that it's already in. He reveals that he has a skill allowing him to produce dozens of poisons from his body, called Phantom Bug's Poison, Deadly Vision. Heitani then complained that it was a bothersome mission because if he felt like it, he could release deadly toxic gas within a 5-kilometer radius, but he couldn't do it in the middle of a city. He explained that the poison would kill him within a minute, so if he agreed to join their organization, Heitani would make the antidote for him, otherwise, he would lose his life. He thought about the toxic gas that is lethal within 5 kilometers and confirmed that Heitani is in S rank, realizing that for a normal person, it would be a disaster. He then looked at his hand and called upon the god of medicine, Valentine, asking if he was right that she was inside him. This made the founders look at Valentine, who was confused and surprised. He apologized to her for calling her so suddenly and asked if she could teach him how to detoxify the poison later, to which she stutteringly replied yes. Heitani threw poison at him while asking what he was mumbling about and if the fear of death had overtaken his mind. He dodged the poison, explaining that the Aikido earlier was from the god of hands, Kudu Hayama, which surprised Kudu inside him and confirmed that he was copying his Aikido from just that one moment. He then called upon the 10,000 army slasher, Hinoki Ryukairu, the blue spear of destruction, Shimer Kalskis, and the heavenly bow, Margit. He told them that he had been studying and remembered all of them from the records. He then informed Heitani that the founders he always adored were now residing inside him, which confused Heitani. But he simply told Heitani that he had no reason to be afraid of him, making Heitani pissed and shoutingly ask how about he teaches him the world of pain. Heitani ran towards him, laughingly telling him that the next poison would make him beg for his life to end. He jumped away to dodge Heitani's attack, and when Heitani hit a nearby tree, it dissolved and died. Heitani then launched another attack, shouting that if he begged and kneeled, he would at least relieve some pain with antidotes. He warned that once he was corrupted by pain, he would never be able to return to normal after going crazy because of it. But he just silently waited for Heitani's hand to get closer, and when he saw that Heitani was close enough, he slid his body to the side and put his hand on Heitani's chest, activating the Fist of Saint, Wantak attack. Heitani coughed up blood when he hit him, which surprised Wantak inside him. Heitani then slammed into a streetlight from the force, and he kicked his face with the Feet of Light, Eilerson, throwing him a distance away, which surprised Eilerson inside him. Yet Heitani managed to stand on his feet, and he swiftly appeared in front of him. As he launched an attack at Heitani, Heitani retaliated with both of his hands. However, he managed to slip through his attack on Heitani's hands, breaking some of his nails, and used the sharp break, Karail attack, which hit Heitani's stomach, making Karail look at him proudly. He then slashed Heitani with the Dragon's Claw, Rowan's skill, stunning Rowan in surprise inside him. He then grabbed Heitani, activated the Flipper of Lilac, and threw Heitani around in mid-air. Heitani, floating, wondered what the hell was happening. He knew that once someone is exposed to poison, their judgment should be clouded and the poison should have already affected his nervous system. Yet he was still moving fine and strong. He then activated the Magus of Truth, Melchia's Silencias, which surprised her, and then released it on Heitani, causing a loud explosion and leaving all the founders in disbelief. Hinoki asked the founders if he was right that they all saw it and told them that just after defeating that insect once, Kannagi was copying all of their moves, both physical and magical. Hinoki also mentioned that he didn't care whether Kannagi's power was from the crest of nothingness or not, but for him, Kannagi was interesting, and they all agreed. Hinoki then told everyone that they should nurture Kannagi because if he was trained by the founders, he would become the strongest Awakener while Kannagi was panically calling for his mother. The scene then shifts to, in the street, men are jumping and running from rooftop to rooftop, with one of them shouting to everyone not to slack off because there are already 15 guilds on the move to get their hands on the boy who fought with Ikehara Midori. He urges them to be fast, but Ikehara appears behind the man, asking if it was really that many, which shocks the man. Ikehara calmly tells him that if it's 15, then he should be the last one, pointing his fingers near the man's forehead. Ikehara then flips the man's head, making him slam hard on the building's roof. Ikehara, with his ravens, calls Rin. Rin, on the other side, replies that she has arrived and that there are no Awakeners detected nearby, but it looks like someone arrived there before them, which surprises Ikehara. Rin then informs him that it was an S-rank hunter named Heitani Goru, the poison user, and that he came to visit Kannagi but was defeated miserably. While looking at Kannagi, who was collapsed on the rooftop with his mouth open, making Ikehara confused. A moment later, they arrive at his house, and Ikehara clappingly praises Kannagi for being amazing, telling him that he never expected he could actually do it, but he really defeated an S-rank hunter on top of it. Ikehara then asks him if he is okay and if he got exposed to the poison, to which Kannagi replies yes, scratching his cheek and telling him that he and his mother are fine. Hinoki then asks what he meant by fine, reminding him that without Valentine there, he would have met the Buddha already, while looking at Valentine, who was complaining that she was tired. Hinoki tells Valentine that she is pretty good, finishing everything within only 5 seconds, and she replies that since the one producing the poison was there, extracting some blood samples was quite simple, recalling how she continuously poked Heitani's body to find the antidote. Ikehara apologizes to Kannagi for being late and explains that he has taken measures against many organizations that are aiming for him because of today's video. This makes Kannagi ask Ikehara if it meant that Heitani was lying by saying that he was his comrade, to which Ikehara replies yes, adding that some people would use his name. Ikehara then asks Rin if she is done, and Rin appears at his side, replying yes. She then tells him that all the damages have been repaired, which surprises Kannagi when he sees that his house window and backyard wall are perfectly fixed. Ikehara then brightly tells him that they should go inside now and have a talk because it is about his future, making Kannagi stunned with nervousness. The next morning, he was outside with his suitcase when his mother asked him if he was really okay, if he had forgotten anything, if he had his wallet, and if he had brought his charger. He assured his mother that he was fine and told her not to worry too much, but she looked at him worriedly, wondering if he was really going to Ikehara's place. Last night, Ikehara had told his mother that he had undiscovered talents and begged her to entrust him to him, swearing that he would make him a great hunter. He excitedly shouted that it was awesome and told his mother that he had been chosen by Ikehara, but he was confused when he saw his mother silent. Back in the present, his mother gave him his lunch, knowing that he hadn't had breakfast, and told him that she had put it in a container and he could throw it away if he didn't like it. He once again assured his mother that he was fine and became silent when he remembered his mother asking Ikehara if it was true that in the future he would face many dangerous situations, to which Ikehara honestly replied yes. His mother told Ikehara that he had always adored the legendary founders and had always struggled until now, so it was an honor for her if he were to take him. But as a parent, she was worried. Ikehara told his mother that he knew it was the job of a hunter to go against monsters and there was no such thing as certainty. But he swore to her that he would train him to be stronger, at least to the point where he wouldn't lose against the founders, making his mother feel assured and entrust him to Ikehara. In the car, Rin asked Ikehara if it was really okay to make such a promise and reminded him that in reality, they didn't even know what would happen in the near future. Ikehara looked at them at the mirror and saw his mother telling him not to sleep while being naked because he always caught a cold because of it. He asked his mother when that happened, but she just told him to be sure to separate his colored clothes when doing laundry, which he agreed to. Ikehara then replied to Rin that he would keep his promise as best as he could. After minutes of reminders, he said goodbye to his mother because it was time to go and told her to wish him luck. He then approached the car, telling his mother to take care, and when he was about to enter, his mother called him and told him to come home during the new year, making him teary-eyed without looking back. He then entered the car and apologized to them for the wait. They then drove away, leaving his mother waving him goodbye. Ikehara asked him if he was done, to which he replied yes and added that if he looked at his mother's face one more time, his resolve would crumble. Ikehara lay down while replying that he understood and told him that it would be a long trip, so he could do anything he wanted, such as eat or sleep. He saw the food his mother had packed for him and opened it, remembering her words. When he opened the lunchbox, he was surprised to see that in his pork cutlet, a good luck message was written, making him remember the comfort, care, and sacrifices his mother made for him. He thanked her for the food and ate it with tears in his eyes while Rin and Ikehara listened. They then continued their journey. A moment later, they arrived at their destination, and he was amazed to see it. Ikehara welcomed him and told him that only a handful of Awakeners were allowed to be there in the Anti-Prophecy unit, also known as Anti-Prophecy, which was their headquarters. He was stunned in amazement. Meanwhile, inside one of the rooms, a man was watching from a window and told another that they had arrived. The new members were there. A lady with black hair asked if she was right that they were talking about the new member. The yellow-haired man replied that it was rare to have a new comrade. But the red-haired man asked if they really said comrade and suggested that they should see if he was truly qualified to be part of the Anti-Prophecy or not. On the other hand, he was looking at the headquarters and asked them what the Anti-Prophecy unit was and if it was perhaps Ikehara's guild. Rin apologized for the delayed explanation and explained that she couldn't explain it properly to his mother because it was a top national secret, which shocked him. He asked her if she really said top national secret, and she calmly replied yes. Ikehara told him that they would discuss it very soon. They then got out of the car, and Ikehara told him that they should bring his luggage to the dorm first. Rin offered to carry his luggage, but he replied that it was fine and he could carry it himself. Just then, someone shouted for them to wait, making him jump a little in shock. He saw a yellow-haired man above them shouting that he should be the one to explain it to him. The man then kicked at him, which he blocked, and the ground he was standing on was destroyed by the force. The man was amazed that he took his attack head-on and praised him for being pretty good. He felt that the man was strong and asked who he was. The man then pushed him back and lands on the ground while telling him to let him introduce himself. The man then proudly introduced himself as Hanada Hikateru, a member of the Anti-Prophecy unit and his comrade, which shocked him because he was the one to explain. Ikehara asked Rin if he could have some tea, and she replied yes while pouring him some. While they were fighting, Ikehara watched them calmly. He asked Hanada why they were doing this despite being comrades. Hanada replied that it was, of course, to explain the Anti-Prophecy unit to him and also to test his skills, making him ask what he meant by testing his skills. Hanada then turned around with speed to gain force and launched a kick at him, which he blocked with both of his arms. When Hanada hit him, he told him that first, he would explain the origin of the Anti-Prophecy unit. He managed to stay on his feet while wondering if Hanada was actually planning to explain everything during the fight. Hanada then launched at him while asking for his name before explaining everything to him. He launched to meet him, replying that his name was Kannagi Minato. Meanwhile, Ikehara was simply drinking his warm tea while watching them, thinking that Kannagi had been tested by the academy, tested by him, tested by an S rank, and even now, he was being tested. Ikehara asked Rin if she thought Kannagi was always being tested, and she replied that it couldn't be helped since Kannagi was a talent that Ikehara scouted himself. Hanada continuously kicked him, and he continuously blocked with his hands. Hanada asked him what a hunter's job was, and he replied that it was to hunt down the monsters that come out from the dimensional cracks. Hanada gave him a thumbs up and told him that his answer was correct, explaining that it was like a pest control task. Hanada then got down on the ground and asked him what about dangers other than that, which surprised him. He asked what he meant by other dangers. Hanada explained that in their world, there are dangers lurking around that are incomparable to the dimensional cracks, like the Pandemonium, 10,000 Demons Castle from 10 years ago, and the Great Outbreak of Kyushu around 5 years ago. He told Hanada that those were large-scale dimensional breaks, but then Hanada launched an attack at him. He managed to block it in time but was thrown back while Hanada told him that he was right and it is what they'll teach him at the academy, and was public knowledge. He was then surprised when Hanada appeared above him at speed, ready to axe kick him, telling him that in reality, it was different. As his foot came crashing down, it struck the tree behind his target, slicing it cleanly in half. Luckily, he managed to dodge just in time. Hanada explained that those were invasions from different dimensions, the same as the Tower of Malevolence from 300 years ago, which was an emergency situation. He couldn't believe it was the same as the tower, but Hanada also told him that the invasion had not yet ended because someone from another world was targeting their world with malicious intent. Hanada then walked closer to him, telling him that he didn't know why the Awakeners were getting weaker compared to the era of the tower, and that there were very few people who had the power on the same level as the founders. He asked Hanada what they should do, and Hanada replied that it was the reason why they existed. Hanada explained that those who could foresee the future with their skills and identify the appearance of these dangers would only tell the elites to deal with those dangers, and those elites were them, the anti-prophecy unit, making Ikahara and Rin proudly smile. He realized that they were an organization to prevent those prophecies. Hanada then told him that starting today, he was one of them. He mentioned that he was the first person who could block his kicks in a row, so he welcomed him. Hanada then extended his hand, welcoming him to the anti-prophecy unit. He shook Hanada's hand while Ikahara and Rin clapped for them. Hanada then called the other Awakeners and shouted that he had recognized his skill. They appeared above the house, and Hanada asked them what they would do, but they just silently stared at him and vanished, surprising him. Ikahara commented that they disappeared just like villains. Hanada sighed, shaking his head, and said that it seemed they wanted to see it with their own eyes. Hanada then told Ikahara to let him take it from there, and Ikahara left him with Hanada. Hanada helped him with his luggage and told him that he would show him his room in the dormitory, to which he thanked Hanada. When night arrived, he was settled in his dormitory room, busy thinking about the organization that dealt with the prophecy in the world. He wondered if the founders had also dealt with the same crisis during the era of the tower, and if he was also fighting against something that had been predicted. He grew anxious thinking about it, but then someone told him that he could just train himself, making him surprised. He saw that it was Hinoki with the other founders. He apologized to them because he hadn't talked with them, but Hinoki told him that he would now share their decision as the founders. They decided to train him to be the strongest Awakener. Just like Ikahara, with everyone together, he could become the strongest Awakener in history, and the disciple of the founders. He was surprised and asked them if they wanted him to be their disciple, to which Hinoki replied yes. He asked why and if they weren't planning on taking over his body. Hinoki laughingly replied that it was indeed a fine suggestion, but they would all be fighting for it, making him imagine a battle royale between the founders. He shouted at them not to fight because of him. Hinoki explained that it was like that at the beginning, but after looking at him thoroughly, they changed their minds. Instead of using his body for their benefit, training him seemed more interesting. Hinoki told him that when he defeated the poison user, he was able to copy all of their moves even though they were only used once. Although it was not at the same level and as proficient as theirs, he had grasped the basics already. Hinoki then asked if he understood how great his achievement was, adding that he didn't know whether it was the effect of his crest of nothingness or not, but his greatest talent was his learning speed, and that talent was stronger than any of the founders. Tears then dropped from his eyes as he listened to Hinoki's words. He remembered the trainer's disappointed looks and their comments that it seemed like he didn't have any talent. Until now, no one had any expectations for him at all, and everything felt just like a dream. He was treated like trash and continuously bullied because he failed the hunter's qualification test 3 times. He also remembered his classmates laughingly shouting at him to stop already and people always forgetting his name because they didn't care about him. No one believed in his future, yet Ikahara and Hinoki, who were big figures, recognized him, making him wonder if it was okay for such happiness to appear in his life. He couldn't believe that the people he had been admiring all this time were expecting him and had such high hopes for him. Hinoki smiled upon seeing his reaction and held him, telling him not to cry. Hinoki then explained that their souls resided inside him, especially during his sleep, so he could use the space inside freely without being bound by space or time. He told him that they would give him 100 hours worth of training every day. During the afternoon, he would train with the anti-prophecy unit, and at night, during his sleep, it would be more training. This meant they wouldn't let him have a peaceful sleep anymore, but he knew he had already resolved himself. Confidently, he replied yes and respectfully told them that he was counting on them. The night went on, and hours later, the sun rose brightly. Hanada was peacefully washing his face in the bathroom when he walked in. Hanada noticed him and greeted him with a good morning. He greeted Hanada back but still looked sleepy. He agreed, explaining that he was still not used to it yet. Hanada told him that he understood because he had felt the same way during his first day in the dorm. However, Hanada then noticed something and saw a strong aura coming out of his body, which surprised him. Hanada tried to kick him, but he simply lowered his head and spit out the water in his mouth at the same time. He walked away, telling Hanada to stop messing around in the morning because he was still sleepy, and that he would go to the cafeteria first. Hanada wondered what was happening, knowing that he had kicked him faster than yesterday, but he easily dodged it. A moment later, in the cafeteria of the anti-prophecy unit, Hinata saw a good spot and asked someone who was eating fruit if she would mind if they joined her, to which the lady replied yes. Hinata then sat down in front of her and told him to sit next to him. He then remembered that the lady in front of him was one of the comrades that Hinata had introduced yesterday. The lady then seriously called him the new guy and told him that he was finally there, making him notice that she didn't seem to welcome him. Nevertheless, he greeted her and introduced himself. She told him that she didn't care and didn't want to remember his name. She then pointed her fork at him and told him that she would call him by his name once she had accepted him. Until then, it was training time, so she would have him come with her to crush a prophecy. In 1945, the first book of prophecy was found on the continent of Antarctica at a depth of 3,000 meters inside the ice. It was called the Book of Doom. Its words are so rough that it feels like they were written by a child. The book predicted that 80 years in the future, the world would be attacked, and various future disasters were also written in it. The world decided to believe the book. While they were in the car, the lady then asked him why he thought they believed the book. He looked at the lady and told her that he still didn't know her name, but she just asked him if she had an obligation to say it and told him to hurry and answer her question. He replied that it was because the prophecy really happened. But she asked him if he was stupid and explained that if even one of the events written in the Book of Doom were to happen, it is said that the world would end, shocking him. He asked Hinata how many prophecies there were, and Hinata replied that he thought there were around 200, making him shockingly ask if they didn't think their world was already doomed. Ikehara told him that they had already prevented around 180 prophecies, which made him jump in amazement. He then reopened the question about why the world believed the book. The lady explained that the name of the explorer who found the Book of Doom was Bernard Russell, and the moment Bernard opened the book, he was greeted with the words on the first page, "Hello Bernard," followed by the date of March 17, 1945, 11:35 a.m., on a sunny day when Bernard Russell discovered the Book of Doom. Hours later, they arrived at the Tokyo Sumida Ward, at the location of a dimensional crack, which was an intermediate level. The guards stopped them and explained that passing on that road was prohibited, so they should leave. However, they just walked past them at speed, surprising the guards. He asked if it was okay, to which Hinata replied yes. The lady then explained, the third world was the dark side of the moon, the invasive pandemic, and the floating trees. Every one of them was an emergency and a serious crisis. Also, the pandemonium outbreak that Ikehara closed. Even if there are some exceptions in the Book of Doom, we already knew that there are many other grimoires of prophecies around the world. So, in order to collect and analyze the pieces of information and act accordingly, the anti-prophecy unit was established. It deals with Rank 3 destruction of one or multiple regions, Rank 2 national emergencies, Rank 1 affecting the environment of the whole planet, and the special rank and super dangerous destruction of the world, as mentioned in the Book of Doom. He replied that he understood and asked her in a panic if those jobs were only for them from now on. She calmly replied that it was given, of course, after joining the anti-prophecy unit. The man then told Kisaragi that someone was coming and saw them walking past the cautious yellow line, asking if they were civilians. Kisaragi shouted to them that the place was dangerous, so they should go home. However, she told Kannagi that today's prophecy was a rank 3, and that dimensional crack in front of them looked like an intermediate B rank at a glance, but it was actually a rank 3 disaster, yellow journal. She knew that the crack would soon open further. Just as she said it, the crack opened wider in a second, making Kisaragi look back in shock and ask what was happening. She then said that a rank and above monsters would be pouring out, which is exactly what happened. Kisaragi shouted to his men to prepare for battle and then attacked the monsters in front of him, but his men were killed, making him cuss in panic. He noticed that the B and C rank hunters were struggling, and he felt the pressure emitted from a boss-level monster. Kisaragi saw them walking forward and called them civilians, telling them to back off, but she cast a Trismegistus spell and put her hand on the ground. She then raised a swarm of spears from underground and threw them at the monsters, killing them instantly by stabbing them to death. Hinata then also attacks the monster and used his slide skill to kick every monster in his path, shocking Kisaragi. He wondered who they were because their abilities were above his despite him being an S rank. The lady told Kisaragi to retreat now because, from their perspective, he was a civilian. Kisaragi noticed the emblem on her hand and recognized that they were from the government. Suddenly, a huge hand came out of the dimensional crack, tearing it wider, and they knew that the beastman Gilia Ulnir in front of them was above S rank. Hinata and the lady immediately rushed to attack the beastman, making Kisaragi panic and shout to them not to attack it carelessly, but they didn't listen and launched their attack together. However, Hinata was surprised when his kicks were deflected, realizing that it had anti-physical armor. Hinata jumped away as it launched toward the lady, who immediately gathered an attack in front of her to counter-attack. but then he appeared in front of her, surprising and confusing her. He simply stopped the beastman with his bare hand and used his one-attack skill, breaking the beastman armor and the ground around them from the impact. The beastman then exploded, stunning everyone in shock. Hinata knew it was a penetration shock. Moreover, he couldn't believe that he had beaten an S+ rank monster with a single hit, confirming his intuition that morning was correct. He was getting stronger in a single night. The lady shouted at him that it was unnecessary, but he knew that against an enemy with high physical resistance, using Kai to destroy the enemy from the inside was the best. He had learned it from Wantak, the 5th Saint, the previous night, the basics of penetration attack. He then looked back at the lady and told her that he went in and saved her, so at least she should tell him her name. She replied that her name was Shinomiya Akane. Hinata then used his physical enhancement skill to attack the monsters that had just emerged from the crack. Shinomiya drenched the monsters in front of her with mercury and then turned it into an explosion with her Mercurius Reject skill. They both shouted that, just like Kannagi said, it was easier if they broke them from the inside. Shinomiya then called to him and told him that they were going inside. Kisaragi shockingly told them that inside that dimensional crack was a completely different world, and that no matter what, it was insane, but he just ran past Kisaragi, heading to the crack while shouting that he was coming. They then jumped inside the dimensional crack, leaving Kisaragi stunned and surrounded by Deta-rank monsters, thinking that they were amazing and confirming that they were from the rumored secret organization. Inside, they were met by a swarm of monsters. Shinomiya raised her hand and told him that those monsters were the same as the ones outside and that there was nothing new. She then threw a swarm of spears at them, which stabbed the monsters around her. He told Hinata that Shinomiya was strong, and Hinata told him that she was the best AoE dealer of the anti-prophecy. Suddenly, a huge bear with armor appeared in front of her, and she called Hinata. Hinata immediately launched himself at the monster, telling her to leave it to him. The monster tried to grab him, but he managed to avoid it and stick to the ceiling, taunting the monster that he was there. Hinata then launched a powerful series of kicks with his kick skill. He praised Hinata for being cool, making Hinata proudly smile. He then jumped onto the ceiling too and attacked the monster with his feet, imitating Hinata. He asked Hinata if it was something like that, making Hinata smile in disbelief. After killing the huge monster, they ran deeper, and Shinomiya noticed that the number of enemies was decreasing, making her ask if they were finally there. He was shocked when he saw a huge different place inside the dimension, and suddenly, they heard a loud growl coming from above them. A monster then descended in front of them, and they were all shocked to see how huge it was. The Minotaur monster furiously screamed, revealing itself as the boss, the Blind Minotaur, which was S3+ rank. Shinomiya told it that it was finally there and asked if it was the boss of that place. She then activated her Trismegistus power, and a strong light appeared beneath the Minotaur. Golden spears emerged from the ground, and she used her El Dorado skill to attack the Minotaur. She shouted to him that rule number 1 against a strong enemy was to use their strongest attack first, and not give them any chance to counterattack. She then shouted to them that she was going all out until her consciousness faded and she would leave the finishing blow to them. Hinata released his power while laughingly saying that it must be nice to have a flashy skill just like Shinomiya. He stood in the back, stunned in amazement at their attacks, but he told them that it was not enough, making them glance back at him confused. Shinomiya shoutingly asked him if he had any complaints about her strongest attack, but before he could answer, the Minotaur raised its axe, which shocked them all. It then slammed its axe on the ground, breaking the ground and the ceiling in the process. She asked if they were kidding her, but Shinomiya and Hinata were even more surprised to see that it was unscathed. Suddenly, he heard one of the founders speak inside him, saying they were talented. He peeked back and saw that it was Killick, the alchemist. Killick told him that Shinomiya's alchemy speed, accuracy, purity, and everything was great, and it was a shame for such a talent to be killed at a young age. Killick then explained that he gave Shinomiya full marks for her method against an unknown enemy. If it were a boss at her level, she should have been able to defeat it easily, but that was not the case here. She underestimated the physical resistance of her enemy, which was 100%. He asked Killick what they should do, but Killick just laughed, while Hinata and Shinomiya tried their best to attack the Minotaur. Hinata told her that it seemed to have high physical resistance, and she replied that she should have come with someone with magic. She was then surprised when Kannagi appeared beside her, not knowing he was possessed by the god of the alchemist, Killick. Killick began to cast a huge Trismegistus, while Killick tells him to lend him his body for a moment because he would show an example to Shinomiya. He used the Mercurius skill to successfully affect the Minotaur. Shinomiya was surprised and shouted, asking him how he was able to use the same skill as her and what he had just done. He called her a fool for not being flexible in her expertise and explained that to become an alchemist, one has to know how to use substances in 3 different forms. He then ordered the mercury inside the Minotaur to boil, burning the inside of the Minotaur, and making the mercury come out of its body hot, cooking the Minotaur's internal organs. Hinata covered his mouth, shouting that it was really boiling. Shinomiya couldn't believe what she was witnessing, but she figured out that instead of using it as a physical attack, Kannagi was using it at an extremely high temperature, which was such a meticulous process while they watched the Minotaur scream and cry in pain. Killick then came out of his body and told him that he was fine with him but wanted Shinomiya to become his disciple too, making Kannagi worriedly tell Killick to stop joking around. Minutes later, the S3 plus boss Blind Minotaur was completely dissolved, and with the defeat of the Blind Minotaur boss, stopping the rank 3 prophecy yellow journal succeeded. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 3 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.